Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Asta and Cinematical, and welcome to all our guests from the Arab world and from Iran. I'm not going to say much, just that we're going to start out this session about documentary film in the Arab world.
Closest to me, Mohamad, Soueid. You'll have to excuse my pronunciation throughout the day. Let me point that out right from the start. So please excuse me. But Mohamad Soueid, we have from Arabiya, based in Dubai, senior producer. Next, we have Yousri Fouda on TV, Egyptian, broadcaster, editor, presenter of a series called Last Word. I'm sure you'll get into that a little bit later. And on the far side, we have Giles Trendle, Al Jazeera, based in Qatar, manager of acquisitions and reversioning, right?
Yeah. Basically, I was an independent filmmaker and writer and film critic, and I worked first for the state government TV in Lebanon, Tele Lebanon, and then I moved to Al Arabiya. Actually, I work as a documentary supervisor for production and acquisition, and this is concisely. Al Arabiya also, it's a channel that belongs to a larger group, it's the MBC group, and it's a profit-making channel also. So
there are different considerations to be taken.
Any project I should bring up, it has to be enhanced by a business plan. So you have a challenge, a double-edged challenge.
My name is Yousri Fouda. I started off back in '94 with the BBC World Service Arabic as a roving reporter covering some war zones. The experience unfortunately lasted only for 2 years, after which I joined the Associated Press TV, helping set up the Middle East TV desk. And then I had the pleasure of being one of the first members to help establish Al Jazeera. 1 year after the establishment of Al Jazeera, I started my own show, which was primarily investigative and taking the shape of a documentary. I left Al Jazeera a couple of years ago because I wanted to go back to my home country, Egypt, and be part of the media scene now and the political scene as well, because I thought it was very interesting, and I thought that I had a role to play there. I deliberately went for a very small organization called On TV. It's very unique in the sense that it's the only, I wouldn't say independent because that would be a judgment. I would say privately owned channel in Egypt, and there are quite a few of them now in Egypt. That's allowed to broadcast news and current affairs and documentaries, as opposed to entertainment programming, which is the main theme for the rest of the privately owned channels in Egypt. Egypt, historically, I'm not sure how many of you guys are aware of the fact that Egypt was only the second country in the world to screen documentaries. The first being in Paris by brothers Auguste and Louis Lumière back in 1895. Only 1 year later, Egypt hosted the second showing of documentaries, which was basically a documentary, a 1 minute documentary about the train arriving at the station. And ever since, Egypt started to have a very solid film industry. And I think Al Jazeera was a breakthrough in that sense when it started back in 1996, because it broke a lot of taboos. And it forced Arab governments into admitting that the world has changed and we have to live with the new realities.
التواجد والنشأة في المناطق العشوائية بتفرض على سكانها اكتساب لغة جديدة للتعامل.
My name is Giles Trendle. I'm manager of acquisitions and reversioning. Acquisitions in Al Jazeera speak means buying films and also films that are commissioned. Just a bit of background about myself and how I got here, and then I'll explain what Al Jazeera is in the network. I went to Lebanon in 1985. I studied philosophy in London. I was unemployed in 1985 and just decided I wanted to get out of London. It was the dark days of Margaret Thatcher. And I took a job as a teacher of English in Lebanon, as a TEFL teacher of English as a foreign language. I spent 1 year in Lebanon teaching English. Then I left Lebanon, but Lebanon never really left me, so I decided that I wanted to go back to Lebanon and this time be a journalist. So in 1988 I went back to Lebanon, and no one in their right mind was in Lebanon at that time. Kidnapping, car bombs, militia street fighting, civil war. But I got a job as a freelance reporter with The Economist and then the Sunday Times, and that's how I kicked off my career in the Middle East. Later I became an independent filmmaker, and then I joined Al Jazeera to work with my colleague Yousri, my colleague and my friend Yousri, and we did a number of great films together. Of course, his program had been going on for many years before. He was the person who interviewed Khalid Sheikh Mohamad and Ramzi bin al-Shib, the two 9/11 masterminds, before they were captured. And the experience of working with Al Jazeera Arabic was very interesting for me, because I had worked with Al Jazeera, I'd worked with the British and American and European media in Beirut, and I deliberately wanted to cross over and work with the Arab media, because in my opinion, from my experience in Beirut, I'd lived 10 years in Lebanon, was that the Western media didn't really report the Middle East properly. It distorted the truth, it perverted the reality, and I got very disillusioned actually working with the Western media. So I wanted to move over to the Arabic media. Working with Al Jazeera Arabic was interesting. In the 3 years that I worked with Al Jazeera Arabic on Top Secret, the show that Yousri presented, we dealt with many stories on issues like 9/11. We did a big story on extraordinary rendition, and it was very much an Arab media looking at issues within Europe. For example, rendition we filmed in, I think you went to Canada, I was filming in Italy and Sweden, where there had been cases of rendition. And although the Western media were reporting, and later reported rendition, we were very much an Arab media reporting on the home patch of the Western media, which sort of turned the reality in an interesting way. Then I joined Al Jazeera English just shortly after Al Jazeera English set up, and Al Jazeera English is a 24-hour news and current affairs channel. It's not an exact carbon copy of Al Jazeera Arabic. Many people, when Al Jazeera English launched, felt that it would be a sort of just an English version of Al Jazeera Arabic. It's not that. We have our own programs, we have our own identity, but I guess you could say we follow the same editorial identity and the same editorial ethos and philosophy. We are, as I said, a 24-hour news channel, and I can talk more once we get into this debate about the various programs and the documentary making. Just to mention, finally, Al Jazeera Network. Many people, sometimes it's quite difficult to understand what is Al Jazeera, but currently the three main channels are, you have Al Jazeera Arabic, which is the original Al Jazeera, we call the mothership. You have Al Jazeera English, which is now who I work for, which is an English language, fully English language. You also have Al Jazeera Documentary channel, which is a 24-hour documentary channel, specifically documentaries, which are shown in Arabic. And then you have various other channels. You have Al Jazeera Children's Channel. You have a channel called Mubashir, which is a live Al Jazeera, sort of streaming live, such as conferences and things, rather like C-SPAN. And then you have something like 20 channels for Al Jazeera Sport. And I'm not sure if you know this, Al Jazeera Sport won the rights for Middle East and North Africa to show the World Cup earlier this year. And there was a big issue. Actually, it's often said by the managers of Al Jazeera that they thought politics was bad enough, but once they entered the sports market, they realized how cutthroat and political it was. Because Al Jazeera, when it was streaming and showing the World Cup games, there was some jamming in the region. Some of the signals were jammed, particularly on the main games, like the Brazil game. And the opening game and the Brazil games, they just went off air. And it's become a big issue, and it's been discovered, allegedly, that somewhere in a town in Jordan, somebody was jamming it, and that it was a very sophisticated jamming, which Al Jazeera believe couldn't have been done without state complicity, if you say. And I think we have a promo, just a 2-minute promo of Al Jazeera English. I can talk, I can talk later on. Another thing I do is I reversion films from our sister channels, Al Jazeera Arabic and Al Jazeera Documentary, and reversion them from Arabic into English, which is an interesting thing in itself, to take a film that has been made in the Arabic language and for an Arab audience, and to reversion it into an English language version. Comes with lots of interesting factors which I can go into later.
We'll definitely get back to that.
In short, what I tried to do at the beginning is to create an Arab network based mainly on directors, because I think, in my opinion, and before the creation of Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya, there was a significant independent underground documentary filmmaking in the Arab world, formed by the newly graduated students from film schools and from people who try to voice themselves through documentaries. In my opinion, this movement it exists, always exists, and it has the qualification that you don't find elsewhere in the Arab world. It's the only democratic current in the Arab world, as far as they are underground. And so you have, I want to say, when you start to work on big scale, you have a basis for that.
So you proactively brought in some of these filmmakers who have been working from the outside?
They were outsourced, and this was the plan I started by the late of 2002, 2003. This was the main plan for me, is to create a kind of continuation for this plan with Arab filmmakers living even in Japan and in Korea, and it was an ambitious program.
Swedish television. Then they'll have various slots. They'll have a current event slot on the Tuesday, and they'll have a more artistic documentary slot on the Sunday, and they'll have a cultural slot on the Wednesday, with different commissioning editors, as it were, that either acquire or commission their projects. Do you have the same kind of slate?
Yeah, we do have this, but the thing is, we're trying also to cater for so many different. The main thing that we are trying to introduce now to Egypt is news and current affairs program outside of state-owned perspective.